Everyone, it's an honor to share this space with you today. I'd like to begin by taking you back to a moment in my life when it felt like everything was going off track. We were trying to get our first rockets off the ground at SpaceX, and it was an uphill battle with endless technical setbacks. We had launched one rocket, and it fizzled out before it even achieved orbit. The second attempt fared no better, and the third seemed to be doomed from the start. Each failure felt like a personal blow. I poured my heart, resources, and endless hours into solving what seemed like insurmountable problems. Rockets insisted on failing. There were times I nearly convinced myself that maybe this dream of reusability and cost efficiency in spaceflight was too grand. Sleep was minimal, stress was maximal. Doubt was creeping in from every direction. Colleagues started to question whether all these attempts were a quixotic pursuit. My personal funds were diminishing, and I could feel the tension rising among our team members. I remember one night sleeping on the floor in our factory, looking up at the flicker of overhead lights, thinking if I set my aim too high. Should I accept that we might never reach orbit? Eventually, though, something stirred. We decided that no matter how many times we failed, we would just try again. We didn't have the luxury of short bursts of intensity. We had to keep going with unwavering consistency. That was the kernel of realization. Every test, every iteration wasn't just brute force. It was about refining our approach gradually, letting data guide us, and staying relentlessly steady. When the fourth launch finally succeeded, felt like a celestial door opening. Instead of celebrating a single shining moment, it became clear that the journey, long, repetitive, and some agonizing, had shaped us into a team able to withstand adversity. The success was almost anticlimactic compared to the hours of gritty perseverance that preceded it, but it validated everything we'd done. I share that story because each of you has faced something difficult in your personal or professional life. You might be teetering on the edge of giving up because your intense bursts of work or creativity haven't produced immediate results. I want you to know that you're not alone, and that the method of pressing on consistently, day after day, is often the most powerful approach. If you've ever watched a small stream carve through rock, you've seen the impact of steady, constant effort. Big, flashy events get headlines, but unrelenting, measured progress is usually what changes the game. So I invite you to come along with me on a new path of thinking. Instead of pursuing short-lived intensity, we're going to embrace a philosophy that rewards long-term discipline. We're going to break down the idea that working tirelessly in bursts solves everything, and instead show how a consistent, methodical approach triumphs in the long run. By the time we finish our conversation today, my hope is that you'll feel equipped with practical insights, drawn from entrepreneurship and life in general, that illuminate just how much momentum you can build through slow but steady forward motion. Let's dive into a deeper understanding of why steady effort over time will always outperform sporadic activities. I've identified 5 key facets of this principle to explore with you. They address different dimensions of why consistency proves so transformative and how it can elevate startups, technology ventures, and personal ambitions alike. I believe you'll find that each point resonates with experiences you've had, whether you're creating code, designing products, leading teams, or simply trying to become the best version of yourself. Let's begin. The first dimension is about discovering the essential factors behind consistent progress, rather than chasing novelty or intensity. Let me start by posing a question when you think of the biggest across technology. From the early days of the internet to modern day AI, what do you believe is the primary reason certain endeavors went from niche concepts to world-changing phenomena? For many, the first instinct is to say, sudden flash of genius. Yet if you dig deeper into the trajectory of the internet itself, you'll see a series of consistent, incremental enhancements. Protocol by protocol, network by network, that gradually built into a global infrastructure. Here is a case study worth examining. Consider how Tesla approached the development of electric vehicles. Early on, there was skepticism everywhere. People said it couldn't be done at scale, or that electric range would never match up to internal combustion engines. The original Roadster had many skeptics shaking their heads. Step by step, through thousands of small experiments, iterative improvements in battery chemistry, and methodical expansions in the supply chain, we shifted from a curious startup with a niche sports car to a global manufacturer championing EV adoption. This progress was anything but explosive at the start. At times, felt painfully slow. We fought manufacturing bottlenecks, overcame supply issues, refined software, and handled wave after wave of engineering challenges. Yet the overarching principle was that each day, we made incremental progress. One refinement in battery efficiency, one software update to improve torque control, one improvement in production line speed. It all added up. Consistent layering improvements eventually reached a tipping point where the world started seeing electric vehicles as not only viable, but essentially the future of transportation. Analyzing this process in depth, It comes down to the fundamental concept that real growth is seldom fueled by enormous leaps. Instead, it's typically the sum of countless small steps. If she's a data point, each day an opportunity to refine, test, or create. When we celebrate success, and it looks sudden, but behind every triumphant headline is a long chain of smaller moves, the kind that never get big media coverage. This is where discipline and continuity matter more than anything else. Without them, you can chase every new idea for a few weeks, but never reach the robust architecture that can withstand real-world challenges. So how do we apply that to our own lives or businesses? The practical solutions lie in embedding consistent routines into your workflows. It might look like daily stand-up meetings that track incremental progress. Weekly sprints where each milestone is tangible and modest. Maybe it means documenting your progress more systematically so you can spot trends early. The point isn't to try and do everything at once. You'd only burn out. Results will be chaotic. Instead, commit to a predictable rhythm, something your team can rely on, something that your customers or stakeholders can watch mature. This reliability builds trust, internally and externally. If we draw a breakthrough conclusion from this, it's that consistency forms the backbone of long-term achievements. Short bursts can be important for creative surges or final pushes. They will never replace the methodical layering of progress. As Albert Einstein once said, a short but telling reflection, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Consider that not just in financial terms, but in every aspect of your efforts. Consistency is what lets small increments compound into massive results over time. Transitioning from this principle of discovery, we should now look at a different angle. The next dimension is better served through storytelling, because the concept of steady effort often resonates best with personal, relatable narratives. Let's step away from the purely analytical lens and turn to a story about grit and measured progress in action. A few years ago, I found myself riding in one of our early production Teslas when a close friend started reminiscing about his own entrepreneurial journey. He grew up in a modest household, always fascinated by computers, with very little support for turning that fascination into something bigger. In high school, he started tinkering with coding after hours. Initially, he wasn't that good. His early programs were clunky and inefficient and riddled with bugs, but he made a promise to himself every single day he would write a small program or solve a tiny coding problem, no matter how trivial it seemed. The story began with a simple hook. He wanted to develop a piece of software that helped local businesses track inventory more easily. At first, no one took him seriously, but he built a minimum viable product that only did a fraction of what a bigger, more polished system might do. It was slow, lacked certain key features, and it often broke when put under pressure. Yet each day, he refined a single part of it. Some days he'd fix 2 or 3 bugs. Days he'd introduce one new feature. A month in, the software was slightly better. 3 months in, it was a little more stable. A year in, local businesses began to notice that it worked well enough to genuinely improve their operations. This was the situations development arc from a raw idea that nobody believed in to a functioning tool that companies actually relied on. Of course, he faced challenges. He had competition, more established software platforms with bigger teams and bigger budgets. He had to solve compatibility issues, handle user data security, and manage a flood of feature requests, all while operating out of a cramped corner of his parents' living room. There were times he considered pivoting to something else entirely. Each time he felt that urge, he remembered the promise he'd made to himself: keep coding, keep refining, keep improving. Over time, he not only refined the software, but also refined his own skill set. He got faster, more creative, more in tune with user feedback. The solutions he introduced were incremental, but they stacked up relentlessly. Eventually, he turned that software into a profitable business, reinvested in better infrastructure. Grew from a one-person show to a dedicated team of developers. The lessons learned from this journey are numerous. First, big results aren't always about having the biggest budget or the largest workforce. Sometimes are a product of unwavering commitment to doing anything, every single day to push the needle forward. Second, the real test of any goal or product is the persistence behind it. It's one thing to pour intense energy into something for a short while, but what really cements success is a steadfast routine that allows it to accumulate. Third, consistency builds confidence. Every time you make a small improvement, you show your team or your market that you can deliver. It fosters loyalty, credibility, and a sense of inevitability, by the time the competition wakes up to your progress. You've already laid an unshakable foundation. I want you to feel a connection to this idea, because each of you has a version of this story within you. It might not be about coding software. It might be about learning an instrument, raising a family, growing a small design firm, or shifting to a healthier lifestyle. The principle is the same. The dose of improvement goes further than sporadic marathons of work that leave you exhausted and less inclined to continue. Let that be your takeaway and your inspiration. A single individual with minimal resources can build an entire business simply by committing to do a little more each day. Imagine what you can do with the resources, networks, and talents at your disposal. Get you down. I want you to feel empowered to adopt a consistent approach in any endeavor, understanding that while the journey might be slow, the outcome can be monumental. And in the words of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, perseverance is a great element of success. If you only knock long enough and loud enough at the gate, you're sure to wake up somebody. That quote might sound quaint, but underscores the vital truth. Your consistent efforts, day in and day out, are the steady knocks that eventually open the door to meaningful achievement. Now, I'd like to shift our viewpoint again. We've touched on discovering the power of incremental progress and heard a narrative illustrating how steady, day-by-day action can build something significant over time. Let's turn our attention toward a more data-centered analysis. In the tech world, we love metrics and graphs. So let's consider the numbers behind consistency versus short bursts of high-intensity work. If you look at research on productivity, you'll find that trying to sustain maximum intensity over extended periods often leads to burnout and declining output. Recent studies suggested that productivity can drop by as much as 20% when individuals push themselves too hard for too long without a pacing strategy. Another piece of data from a global survey of startups showed that venture scaling at a moderate, consistent rate, optimizing hiring and product development in a balanced way, were far more likely to survive past their fifth year than those experiencing hyper growth followed by a crash. The precise statistic might vary depending on sources, but the trend remains the same: slow, stable expansion has a better longevity record than explosive growth that's difficult to sustain. Trends similarly point toward the value of consistency. Consider how subscription bases have changed the revenue landscape. Rather than relying on large, one-time customer purchases, companies like Netflix, Spotify. Various SaaS platforms focus on a steady stream of monthly revenue. This model thrives precisely because it's consistent. Customers maintain an ongoing relationship, and the company can predictably invest in new features or infrastructure. The market has rewarded these business models with higher valuations in many cases because predictability in revenue is more attractive than big spikes followed by periods of stagnation. Investors, partners, and customers alike appreciate knowing that progress is systematic. From an in-depth research perspective, there's also evidence showing that consistent practice is essential to mastery. In fields as diverse as music, sports, engineering, and data science, the concept of deliberate practice, spreading learning across frequent, focused sessions, outperforms a binge learning model. Neurologically, brains encode information more effectively when we revisit tasks regularly. The repeated engagement with a skill or problem creates stronger synaptic connections and leads to deeper retention. It's no different in a startup environment. Teams that revisit strategic goals regularly, performing consistent retrospectives and iterative improvements often chart a clearer path to product market fit than those that lurch from to pivot without a stable framework. So how do we apply this statistically and scientifically sound principle in a practical context? Approach is setting measurable milestones that you evaluate at regular intervals. If you're building a new app, for instance, track not just the total lines of code or features added, but features activity and user status feedback over time. Gather you systematically, maybe weekly or bi-weekly, so you can make minor adjustments before issues balloon. Another approach is forming a culture that encourages incremental innovation. Instead of waiting for the one big idea, empower your team to suggest tiny enhancements daily. Over the course of a year, these incremental innovations can radically reshape a product's capabilities. Peering into the future, I predict that consistency will become even more pivotal in an era marked by technological acceleration. Artificial intelligence and automation on the rise, the competition will be fierce. Comp individuals who rely on sporadic bursts of inspiration or short-lived mania might find it harder to keep up with those who methodically embrace the new tools and evolve step by step. The future belongs to those who iterate and adapt in small, constant increments rather than betting everything on a single big leap. As Peter Druckermans put it, long-range planning does not deal with future decisions, with the future of present decisions. In fewer than 25 words, that quote highlights the unstoppable force of consistent action. Every decision you make today, repeated day after day, shapes your trajectory far more than a grand plan you only touch once in a while. We've examined consistency from several angles now: discovery, storytelling, and a data-driven perspective. Let's pivot towards something a bit more interactive. Even though we're not in a physical workshop setting, I want you to imagine a simple thought exercise. Picture the most audacious goal you ever set for yourself. Launching a startup, writing a best-selling book, building an AI tool that can solve complex real-world problems. Whatever it is, hold that image in your mind. Now, break it down into 365 steps. Each step represents one day of the year. I want you to mentally assign a micro-action each for those 365 days. Something that's doable under an hour or maybe even just 15 minutes. Visualize yourself committing to these micro actions every single day for 1 year. How far could you realistically go? If you were here in person, I'd ask you to discuss this scenario with the person next to you. Compare notes, see which big project you're drawn to, and how you might translate them into daily tasks. Then I'd invite you to share experiences where you previously tried something like this. Some of you found it tedious or lost motivation halfway. Others might have discovered that the slow, regular approach led to breakthroughs more profound than expected. By opening the group discussion, we'd uncover a range of insights and best practices. People could highlight common stumbling blocks, such as complacency, lack of visible progress, or the temptation to take big leaps just for the thrill of it. We'd also discover success stories, moments where someone's daily discipline built unshakable confidence and skill. Let me also encourage a form of experience sharing, even if only in your own reflections. Think about moments in your life where you managed to stay consistent over an extended period. It might have been going to the gym every morning, studying a new language, setting aside time each weekend to work on a passion project. What did that regularity feel like? How did it change your day to day mindset? Most people describe it as creating a sense of reliable structure. It builds momentum because you don't have to debate with yourself each day about whether to do the task. You just do it the same way you brush your teeth or cook a meal. Over time, your identity starts to shift. You become the kind of person who invests in a particular goal consistently. That psychological change can be a game changer for motivation. In a direct practice sense, it might help to formalize your commitment, is to keep a consistency journal log. Every day you complete your micro action, you give yourself a small check mark. A digital tool, a spreadsheet, or an app can help you track this. Recording your progress can feel surprisingly rewarding and also provides accountability. If you see a streak of 30 or 40 consecutive days, you'll be less inclined to break it. You realize that the power of your forward motion is more valuable than any fleeting temptation to skip a day. As we near the end of this interactive conceptual exercise, the learning summary is simple. Dynamics and personal reflection both highlight that we are wired to thrive on regular rhythms. This is why habit formation is such a prevalent topic in productivity circles. Why it remains so crucial in organizational development. If you can channel a fraction of your daily energy into a consistent routine, you amplify your results far beyond what's possible through sporadic efforts. Practicing this with your team or even individually, you'll see a compounding effect that can carry you over obstacles that would otherwise seem insurmountable. Transitions us naturally into the final key dimension I want to discuss. We've seen how consistent action is discovered, narrated, analyzed, and even practiced in a theoretical group setting. Now, let's tackle it from a problem-solving perspective. One of the biggest challenges in any venture, particularly in startups and technology, is identifying which tasks or goals deserve that consistent effort. So let's identify that challenge first, because let's face it, you can't apply unrelenting effort to every single problem equally. If you try, you'll end up spreading yourself so thin that your consistency loses potency. Analysis reveals that the primary problem is not that people lack the willingness to work. It's usually that they try to do too many things at once, or they lose sight of the true priority. Maybe they jump from one project to another, throwing short bursts of intensity at each, hoping one will stick. The result is often scattered progress and incomplete solutions. Instead, pinpoint the one or two critical levers that, if consistently applied, will create the most significant ripple effects. Solution proposals, therefore proposals, revolve around focus and alignment. Start by clarifying your overarching mission. Is your primary goal to scale your business, innovate new technology, or break into a specific market segment? Once you know that core aim, identify the daily or weekly actions that have a direct impact on moving closer to that goal. This might involve building a robust feature set, gathering user feedback, developing your marketing channels, or refining a key engineering process. The key is to keep the scope tight enough that you can work on it consistently without burning out. For instance, if your overarching mission is to build a cutting-edge AI tool, you might allocate daily time to data collection, model training, or user testing, rather than trying to do everything from user interface design to marketing simultaneously. From here, craft an action plan. Lay out a clear schedule. Maybe you set aside early mornings for coding and late afternoons for marketing. Define small, achievable milestones. Celebrate each milestone. Never see it as a finish line, just another step in a continuing series of steps. Consistency needs structure to flourish, so that plan becomes the foundation you rally upon when your motivation dips or distractions arise. Finally, success metrics become your guideposts. If you don't measure results of your consistent efforts, you risk stagnating. So define how you'll gauge progress. It might be the number of paying customers, reliable code, or new markets entered. Tracking these metrics gives you real feedback on whether your consistent actions are producing desired outcomes. If they're not, adjust the actions while maintaining the routine. The routine is your vehicle. The metrics tell you if you're on the right road. It's akin to the advice from Winston Churchill, who once said in about 20 words, "Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential." If you parse that carefully, it reaffirms that each of us has within us the capacity for extraordinary achievements. We channel our energy in methodical, sustained manner. Now that we've journeyed across these 5 dimensions, it's time to look forward. Future holds remarkable opportunities for those who can harness the power of steady effort. As we move to the conclusion of our talk, I'd like to sketch out a broader vision. At a time when headlines are captivated by breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, hyperloops, interplanetary travel, and quantum computing, it might be tempting to think that everything hinges on dramatic, revolutionary moments. I assure you, even those breakthroughs emerge from carefully orchestrated, consistent effort. Picture a future where startups don't just chase viral success, but invest day by day in building platforms and products that deeply resonate with humanity's needs. Imagine large companies adopting a consistent approach to social and environmental responsibility, tackling climate change not with fleeting initiatives, but with ongoing systematic commitments. Envision your own life in 5 or 10 years shaped by the seeds of daily persistence you plant now. This is the future vision, a world less addicted to the highs of short-lived intensity and more grounded in the steady, unstoppable push of long-term determination. Here, I want to pose a challenge for each one of you. Find one significant area in your life, professional or personal, and decide that for the next 30 days. You will do one thing every day to advance it. Don't try to overhaul your entire existence overnight. Pick a project or a skill. Break it into manageable daily parts and track your progress. By the end of those 30 days, see how far you come. There's a strong chance you'll not only have improved in that area, but you'll also have gained a deeper appreciation for what consistent effort can accomplish. If you're leading a team, extend that same challenge to them. Make it a group experiment and see how it transforms your culture. I also want to extend a personal pledge of support. Wherever you are in your journey, the tools and resources for incremental progress are more accessible now than they've ever been. Online education, collaborative platforms, open source technologies, global networks, these all exist to make steady growth feasible. Lean on them and lean on each other. If you're in the startup scene, consider how accelerators and mentorship programs can guide you step by step. If you're tackling a personal goal, maybe an accountability partner or a well-structured habit app can keep you on track. The point is, you don't have to go it alone. Tap into the robust communities that exist for virtually any pursuit under the sun. Lastly, as we draw to a close, let me leave with an inspiring thought. Each of us carries dreams that can transform not our own lives, but the lives of those around us. Often these dreams stall because we're seduced by the idea that success must be swift and spectacular. But history, time and again, shows the real game changers were those who embrace the grind, the routine, and the day-to-day progress that's almost invisible from the outside. Most extraordinary achievements are built on a foundation of ordinary days well spent. So my wish for you is to find that rhythm, that pace of consistent action that can turn your aspirations into realities. Your dream is to revolutionize an industry, write the next chapter of technological history, or simply improve your daily life in meaningful ways. Steady effort will carry you where flashes of intensity alone cannot. Let's all commit to that journey, confident that every incremental step forward is another step closer to the extraordinary. Our world needs people who aren't just sprinting. It needs marathoners who show up day after day, mile after mile, steadily shaping our collective future for the better. Go forth and be relentless in the most measured, disciplined way possible. When we look back after years of patient, persistent work, we'll see just how far we've come, and we'll have built something truly lasting.